fascinated Eric. Never had he seen a countenance indicative of a more intense and stubborn will-power. Margaret Gordon was dead and buried. The picture was a cheap and inartistic production in an impossible frame of gilt and plush. Yet the vitality in that face dominated its surroundings still. What then must have been the power of such a personality in life? Eric realized that this woman could and would have done whatsoever she willed, unflinchingly and unrelentingly. She could stamp her desire on everything and everybody about her, molding them to her wish and will, in their own despite and in defiance of all the resistance they might make. Many things in Kilmeny's upbringing and temperament became clear to him. If that woman had told me I was ugly, I should have believed her, he thought. Even though I had a mirror to contradict her, I should never have dreamed of disputing or questioning anything she might have said. The strange power in her face is almost uncanny, peering out as it does from a mask of beauty and youthful curves. Pride and stubbornness are its salient characteristics. Well, Kilmeny does not at all resemble her mother in expression, and only very slightly in feature. His reflections were interrupted by the entrance of Thomas and Janet Gordon. The latter had evidently been called from his work. He nodded without speaking, and the two sat gravely down before Eric. "I have come to see you with regard to your niece, Mr. Gordon," he said abruptly, realizing that there would be small use in beating about the bush with this grim pair. I met Neil Gordon in the Connors orchard, and I found that he has told you that I have been meeting Kilmeny there." He paused. Thomas Gordon nodded again, but he did not speak, and he did not remove his steady, piercing eyes from the young man's flushed countenance. Janet still sat in a sort of expectant immovability. "I fear that you have formed an unfavourable opinion of me on this account, Mr. Gordon," Eric went on, "but I hardly think I deserve it. I can explain the matter if you will allow me. I met your niece accidentally in the orchard 3 weeks ago, and heard her play. I thought her music very wonderful, and I fell into the habit of coming to the orchard in the evenings to hear it. I had no thought of harming her in any way, Mr. Gordon. I thought of her as a mere child, and a child who was doubly sacred because of her affliction. But recently it occurred to me that I was not behaving quite honorably in encouraging her to meet me thus. Yesterday evening I asked her to bring me here and introduce me to you and her aunt. We would have come then if you had been at home. As you were not, we arranged to come tonight. I hope you will not refuse me the privilege of seeing your niece, Mr. Gordon," said Eric eagerly. "I ask you to allow me to visit her here. But I do not ask you to receive me as a friend on my own recommendations only. I will give you references, men of standing in Charlottetown and Queensly. If you refer to them—" "I do not need to do that," said Thomas Gordon quietly. "I know more of you than you think, master. I know your father well by reputation, and I have seen him. I know you are a rich man's son, whatever your whim in teaching a country school may be. Since you have kept your own counsel about your affairs, I supposed you didn't want your true position generally known, and so I have held my tongue about you. I know no ill of you, master, and I think none, now that I believe you were not beguiling Kilmeny to meet you unknown to her friends of set purpose. But all this doesn't make you a suitable friend for her, sir. It makes you all the more unsuitable. The less she sees of you, the better." Eric almost started to his feet in an indignant protest, but he swiftly remembered that his only hope of winning Kilmeny lay in bringing Thomas Gordon to another way of thinking. He had got on better than he had expected so far. He must not now jeopardize what he had gained by rashness or impatience. "Why do you think so, Mr. Gordon?" he asked, regaining his self-control with an effort. "Well, plain speaking is best, master. If you were to come here and see Kilmeny often, she'd most likely come to think too much of you. I mistrust there's some mischief done in that direction already. Then, when you went away, she might break her heart, for she is one of those who feel things deeply. She has been happy enough, I know folks condemn us for the way she has been brought up, but they don't know everything. It was the best way for her, all things considered. And we don't want her made unhappy, master." "But I love your niece, and I want to marry her if I can win her love," said Eric steadily. He surprised them out of their self-possession at last. Both started, and looked at him as if they could not believe the evidence of their ears. "Marry her? Marry Kilmeny?" exclaimed Thomas Gordon incredulously. "You can't mean it, sir. Why, she is dumb. Kilmeny is dumb." "That makes no difference in my love for her, although I deeply regret it for her own sake," answered Eric. "I can only repeat what I have already said, Mr. Gordon. I want Kilmeny for my wife." The older man leaned forward and looked at the floor in a troubled fashion, drawing his bushy eyebrows down, and tapping the calloused tips of his fingers together uneasily. He was evidently puzzled by this unexpected turn of the conversation, and in grave doubt what to say. "What would your father say to all this, master?" he queried at last. "I have often heard my father say that a man must marry to please himself," said Eric with a smile. "If he felt tempted to go back on that opinion, I think the sight of Kilmeny would convert him. But after all, it is what I say that matters in this case, isn't it, Mr. Gordon? I am well educated and not afraid of work. I can make a home for Kilmeny in a few years, even if I have to depend entirely on my own resources. Only give me the chance to win her, that is all I ask." "I don't think it would do, master," said Thomas Gordon, shaking his head. "Of course, I dare say you, he tried to say love, but Scotch reserve balked stubbornly at the terrible word. "You think you like Kilmeny now, but you are only a lad, and lads' fancies change." "Mine will not," Eric broke in vehemently. "It is not a fancy, Mr. Gordon. It is the love that comes once in a lifetime, and once only. I may be but a lad, but I know that Kilmeny is the one woman in the world for me. There can never be any other. Oh, I'm not speaking rashly or inconsiderately. I have weighed the matter well, and looked at it from every aspect. And it all comes to this. I love Kilmeny, and I want what any decent man who loves a woman truly has the right to have, the chance to win her love in return." "Well," Thomas Gordon drew a long breath that was almost a sigh. "Maybe, if you feel like that, master, I don't know. There are some things it isn't right to cross. Perhaps we oughtn't. Janet, woman, what shall we say to him?" Janet Gordon had hitherto spoken no word. She had sat rigidly upright on one of the old chairs under Margaret Gordon's insistent picture, with her knotted, toil-worn hands grasping the carved arms tightly, and her eyes fastened on Eric's face. At first their expression had been guarded and hostile, but as the conversation proceeded they lost this gradually and became almost kindly. Now, when her brother appealed to her, she leaned forward and said eagerly, "Do you know that there is a stain on Kilmeny's birth, master?" "I know that her mother was the innocent victim of a very sad mistake, Miss Gordon. I admit no real stain where there was no conscious wrongdoing. Though, for that matter, even if there were, it would be no fault of Kilmeny's, and would make no difference to me, as far as she is concerned." A sudden change swept over Janet Gordon's face, quite marvellous in the transformation it wrought. Her grim mouth softened, and a flood of repressed tenderness glorified her cold grey eyes. "Well, then," she said, almost triumphantly, "since neither that nor her dumbness seems to be any drawback in your eyes, I don't see why you should not have the chance you want. Perhaps your world will say she is not good enough for you, but she is. She is," this half defiantly. "She is a sweet and innocent and true-hearted lassie. She is bright and clever, and she is not ill-looking. Thomas, I say let the young man have his will." Thomas Gordon stood up as if he considered the responsibility off his shoulders and the interview at an end. "Very well, Janet, woman, since you think it is wise.